I'm Juju Talk Sports. That's Jose Corral. This is 49 Reasons to Listen. If you haven't hit subscribe already, go ahead and do that because we're here for all things Niners, all things for the Niners faithful out there. We're going to break down an interesting trend because the Niners have a little bit of a overcrowded wide receiving room right now. If you're looking at Kyle Shanahan's history, typically the Niners carry about 6-7 wide receivers going into the season. Right now they have 12. So right off the bat, Jose, we could probably cut out like 3 names like Sean Poindexter, Chris Thompson, all these kind of like practice squad guys. But who is a lock to make this roster aside from Debo and Aiyuk? Because let's face it.
Okay, yeah. If you put aside Debo Samuel, which will probably be the number 1 receiver for Jimmy Garoppolo this year, then Brandon Aiyuk, first round pick. He was a first round pick for a reason. They're really excited for him. I think you got to add Kendrick Bourne in there as well. He finished the season strong last year and had a great postseason. Had 6 catches, had that 1 touchdown. Had a really good postseason, had a good second half of the regular season. So I think if there's a way for him to stay, which everything leads to him finding a way to stay with the Niners and the Niners making it work for him to stay, he's obviously a lock. I think you look at a guy like Richie James. That's also for me a lock, not just on the wide receiver end, where he did have a couple of games even in week 1, he had a touchdown. A guy like him, not only for a wide receiver, but he was our kick return guy. I don't see that changing. So I think he'll be a lock, and he's like a little bit more of a speedster guy that's Kyle Shanahan is going to really like to throw out there. You look at guys like Trent Taylor and Jalen Hurd, who we were really excited about them going into last year. But, injuries happened. Jalen Hurd actually had a couple of good games. So I think those two, they come back as well. So then you kind of go into that spot as to who takes that last one. I think Dante Pettis gets an extra shot. I know we talked about this before with Dante Pettis. But I think he's going to get 1 more year really to prove what he could really do, just because when he was drafted, I know people were really, really excited. I know I was excited for him too, seeing him out of Washington, but I think he's just going to get 1 more shot. And I think that'll probably round it out. But you did mention 6. They usually carry about 6 or 7 guys. Mm-hmm. I don't know that is still loaded to begin with. And then you always have to throw in the X factor, which is George Kittle, which you almost throw him as an extra receiver there. But I think those are your locks. Like for sure, guys that at this point, if they didn't get rid of them, Kyle Shanahan plans to use them.
Okay, well, let's talk about probably the wide receiver everyone wants to talk about, Dante Pettis. So the Niners traded up in 2018 to pick up Pettis in the 2nd round. So Kyle clearly loves this guy, right? Or at least loved Dante Pettis at the time of draft day to use, the draft capital to go up and grab him. And I remember that day they were justifying why they went and did that. And it's not unusual for Kyle to do that. He did the same thing with C.J. Beathard the year before as well. He traded up in the 3rd round to grab C.J. And, C.J. didn't work out. Joe Williams the year before in the 3rd round didn't really work out. So Kyle can be wrong in these draft evaluations from time to time. And there is some unique things about when you watch Dante, like the way he runs, like the way he gets into 2nd gear and unloads the trailer is a little bit slow. It's a little bit awkward. And I think what's the biggest question with him is his toughness, not only physical, but mental, because he was hurt his rookie year. He didn't really get into the flow until later in the season. And then in 2018, the highest target total he had in all of his games, 6. His final stat line for the entire year was 24 targets, 11 receptions, 109 yards. That's what you could do you could do his stat total in a game. It's kind of sad, and he's only really had any real flow with Nick Mullins. Well, Nick Mullins is the backup, and if Niners fans are lucky, Nick Mullins will not take a single snap this year. Let's knock on wood, pray that's the case. But Nick Mullins will not step on the field this year if we know what's good for us. So he has to figure out stuff with Jimmy. He had an impressive touchdown the first week, game 1 of 2018, I remember, with Jimmy. And then Jimmy got hurt week 3. And then from there, went quiet, an injury. Like I said, he picked things up in the Seattle games. But clearly him and Jimmy are not on the same page. Now, you talk about some of those other wide receivers in there. Trent Taylor in 2017, you could definitely tell him and Jimmy, they just had something going on there. I mean, you look at his game logs, nothing too special from Trent, but at the same time, I felt like in third down situations, in short yardage situations, he was that guy that just could get a little open. He's that little stereotype of the short, white slot receiver. But, it's kind of funny because you want to know who our wide receiving coach is? Wes Welker, one of the best slot receivers of the last 10 years, So I think even though we always make that comparison, who better to learn from by one of the best over the last, stretch of years at that position. So I think Trent Taylor is a lock for this team because Jimmy loves him and looks for him. Jalen Hurd is a little questionable, but why I think Jalen is also a lock as well, because Kyle likes tough wide receivers. Jalen Hurd was a running back in college, or was a running back for Tennessee at points before transitioning to wide receiver. He still has that mentality because if you look at that preseason game against Dallas where he had the 2 touchdowns that made everyone rave about him, he was barreling into guys. He's lowering the shuttle, lowering his shoulder, laying down the boom on these guys. And that's the kind of stuff that I think Kyle loves. I mean, you look at how Debo does it. And I think that's kind of the mold that he wants to have in all his wide receivers. That is why Dante's spot on this roster is so questionable. I cannot see Dante Pettis laying the hit stick on anyone. And he barely can even get by an open and man coverage as well. He's just not physical against press coverage either. So that's why I think that maybe Dante's time on this roster has come to an end.
No, I completely agree with that. And the only reason I say he might stick or they might keep him around is because if they would have had the chance to get rid of him, I think they would have done it by now. They did it pretty quick with Marquise Goodwin. They didn't waste time to get rid of him. But obviously, you're not going to get the same value with the Marquise Goodwin that you're going to get with Dante Pettis, unfortunately. So, I mean, you're not going to be able to trade for the guys. So, at this point, if you don't want him on the roster, you're just going to have to cut him. And I think at this point, if Kyle Shanahan just didn't see a future for him on that playbook, he would have just cut the strings right there and said, okay, let's cut this guy and let's see what Juwan Jennings could do. That's a guy that we forgot to mention. He's more of a bigger guy. You mentioned Jalen Hurts, more of a physical guy out of Tennessee as well. Juwan Jennings looks just as physical, if not maybe a little bit more physical than Jalen Hurts did when he first came into the league. I'm a little bit excited to see what he could possibly do if he could maybe find a roster spot as well.
Well, here's the thing, and you also mentioned Richie James Jr. as well, potentially for that kick return role. They also have Travis Benjamin there, and Travis has been with Kyle before in Cleveland. Travis is able to do kick returns, punt returns, and as far as Richie James' spot on the roster, in the Super Bowl, I feel he was a huge detriment to the Niners. Look at all of his returns in the Super Bowl. They were short yardage. He kept putting the team behind where they needed to be. And I think, starting behind the stick, starting behind the 25-yard line caught up to them. You can only drive down the field so much in a game, especially against a tough team in the Super Bowl situation. So I think that is going to hurt Richie. And I think Richie might be facing his last year, too, with the team because I think Travis Benjamin's going to beat him out. And if he doesn't beat out Richie James, I think he could beat out Dante Pettis because contractually, they're about equal in pay. Dante is a second-round receiver, still gets a decent payday himself. It's kind of funny and kind of unique, but Trent Taylor and Kendrick Bourne are the veterans of this team at this point. They're the longest tenured wide receivers. And at the moment, Kendrick Bourne is the highest paid wide receiver out of this group as well at $3 million. So that's why some speculation has also come up about potentially trading Kendrick Bourne. I don't think that's going to happen because Jimmy loves Kendrick, and Kendrick's mentality this offseason is everything you love to see as a fan. You can't buy too much into those Instagram hype videos, those workout videos. We see Cam Newton posting them all the time. But at the same time, Kendrick is looking jacked this year. He is looking ready for this season. Revenge Tour 2020, if you're believing in that hashtag, Kendrick is the biggest believer of that phrase.
Oh, yeah, I was a huge fan of how he ended last season. Towards that second half of the regular season, you saw Jimmy Garoppolo be more confident with him. He started looking for him, in a lot of situations where Emmanuel Sanders just couldn't get open, his next guy a lot of the times was just Kendrick Bourne, and if it wasn't Deebo Samuel. So I think he's really going to have to be, if he ends up sticking on the team, which, like I said before, I just feel like there's going to be a way that those guys, the front office and him, they're going to find a way for him to be on the team. It feels like he likes to be a Niner. He wants to be a Niner. He wants to get back to the Super Bowl with the Niners. So if he is in the team for 2020, he's going to have to be that number 2 guy now, right behind Deebo Samuel. Depending on how, Brandon Aiyuk kind of fits into the team, I think Kendrick Bourne is going to really have to step up and have a great year. Kind of just stepping up to what he did the second half of this past season. But yeah, like you mentioned, we were mentioning earlier, Deebo Samuel is a lock, obviously, and kind of shifting gears into him. He's going to have to be Emmanuel Sanders of last year. He is going to have to be the number 1 wide receiver. He'll have to be the number 1 option for Jimmy Garoppolo. He's going to have to, maybe deal with some double coverages from secondaries for most of the season. So it's going to be interesting to see his development into his second year. And I think he'll be fine. I think as long as he could avoid a sophomore slump, he doesn't have to be lights out. He doesn't have to have 8+ catches every game for him to have a productive season. I just think as long as he could avoid having a letdown and having a sophomore slump, we're going to have a good wide receiver number 1 there with him.
I believe so too. And I think you brought it up earlier that George Kittle does kind of take away, the other defenders as well. If you're going to double cover Kittle, then that kind of will take some coverage off of Deebo and open him up more. Not to mention, Kyle just does a great job of scheming these guys open anyway. So, I'm looking at this, and Juwan Jennings, that's another one I haven't really talked about myself. He is big. He is strong. There is some questions. Like, I know everyone loves him, and everyone thinks that we have a big steal in the 7th round this year. But let's not forget, he did run a 4.7 at the Combine, which is just god-awful. If I ever run a 4.7 in my life, I'd be happy. But for the most part, for an NFL player, that is below average speed. It's kind of amazing that he was able to do what he did in the SEC, given that, you're going to see the best defenses, the best coverages in that conference. But so, that's kind of unique. But, he also was like the number 1 target on that team. That could also explain why he did have so much success like he did. Brandon Aiyuk is going to be behind the curve a little bit. He's a lock to make the team, but obviously I think it's going to hurt the Niners that they didn't have a mini camp. There's a lot of questions with the virtual camps and everything. I know the Bears cut theirs like a week short. So we'll see like how prepared he is coming into the year. I think that they will finish or go into the season with 6 wide receivers. And if I was just going to name off who I think is going to make this roster, it's obviously Deebo and Aiyuk, as I mentioned, Kendrick Bourne. I'm going to say Travis Benjamin makes it. I'm going to say Trent Taylor makes it. And I'm going to say Jalen Hurd. So those are going to be my 6 guys going into the year. Travis Benjamin's going to take over more of that kick return role with Richie James gone. But like Dante Pettis, I think they have to cut bait. Juwan Jennings, it sucks that they're drafting him in the 7th round and have to cut him or, move him to the practice squad. But I just don't see a spot for him right now unless they want to roll out 7. It doesn't really fit to me. And I just think that you look at the physicality of some of these guys, they're not going to go away. Jimmy has a great rapport with some of these guys, and I think that's going to really help them when it comes to final roster decisions. I feel for Dante, but he let himself down. I don't know the full inside details of why him and Kyle Shanahan don't really connect or see eye to eye anymore, but it's clear when you just look at the snap counts that something's off with that guy mentally.
No, yeah, if you told me coming into the season that Kendrick Bourne was going to have way more of an impact than Dante Pettis was going to have on the team, I would have gone crazy. Or even like Marquise Goodwin last year didn't do much. I would have called you crazy. But yeah, it is interesting to see what happened there with Dante Pettis. But like I said, I was really excited when they drafted him in the 2nd round. The guy was a speedster. He was burning through all Pac-12 secondaries, and Pac-12 secondaries aren't a joke. You could talk about Pac-12, anywhere else, but a lot of good secondary talent comes out of the Pac-12, and he was just burning guys in college. So I was really, really excited when they were able to get him. But for some reason, like you mentioned, it's just not there. And maybe it is time for them to let it go. But for some reason, I just feel like if they would have had the chance to do it, they would have done it by now. And you never know. I feel like any 6-7 guys that are out there in the rotation for Kyle Shanahan, he's going to make any of those guys work. he's going to find a way to get guys open, get guys going even in the backfield. He used that a lot with Deebo Samuel last year on just crazy end arounds, double reverses. He's going to, if that's what it takes to get guys going, I mean, Kyle Shanahan's going to do it. So I'm not too worried exactly about who are the last like 2-3 guys to make the team as far as like wide receiver depth goes, because I feel like it's really comes down to the primary guys like George Kittle and Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk and Kendrick Bourne. If those guys just win their matchups every single time, then it's not going to matter who wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 7 are, because all the attention is going to go to Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. So I think either way, I'm still confident that any of the guys that they decide to keep on the roster, they're going to be able to have a chance to produce. You know, they're going to get their chances to produce. They're going to have situations where they're going to be open, and it's just going to be up to them to be able, you know, to produce.
Reiterate one more time your final 6 that are going to make this roster.
Okay, so we got Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk. I called Richie James, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Hurd, and Trent Taylor.
Okay, so it just seems like we're off on, you know, Richie James.
Guys.
But you actually switched there because you said Dante Pettis you thought was going to make the roster at the
Yeah, because I added him as the 7th guy just in case. So
if we carry 7,
I think if they carry 7, he'll end up making the team. And then I think Juwan Jennings, I think since they drafted him, I don't see them getting rid of him. They might just throw him on like special teams or something, if that's the way to go. Because he's a physical guy. I mean, I don't know, just maybe keep him there just in case.
Only so many spots on the roster, though. You know, that's what makes it tough. You know, and like I hate that some of these guys will have to get cut, traded, or whatever. But you know, like they just have to make room because, I mean, it's going to really come down to camp, and we'll see what training camp looks like this year, especially because Santa Clara needs to ease up a little. But you know, like there's going to be guys to separate. I mean, we're really dissing hard on Dante. Who's to say Dante doesn't come back into training camp and he's just looking straight jacked? I haven't heard much. I don't know if he's been one of the receivers that have been out there with Jimmy, because I know Jimmy has made it a point to go play catch with his wide receivers. If Dante's not there, he's doing himself a disservice. But Niners faithful, what do you think? Let us know in the comments. Who do you think is going to make this roster? Do you think Dante Pettis is going to get cut? Who else do you think is going to get cut? We'll see you back next week. Have a great one. Bye.